Have you ever had that moment where your entire world shifts on its axis? Where one phone call, one letter, one seemingly ordinary moment suddenly reveals that everything you thought you knew was built on sand? That happened to me on what should have been the best day of my professional life. I was about to secure financing for my dream business, a bakery I'd planned since I was 16, kneading dough beside my grandmother. I had the business plan, the recipes, the location scouted. I had excellent credit I'd built meticulously since college. I had everything except the final loan approval. Then came the call that changed everything. "I'm sorry, Ms. Mitchell, but there's a significant issue with your application." Those words would unravel not just my business dreams, but my entire understanding of family, trust, and what it means to protect yourself from the people who should protect you. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 32 years old, and until last year, I thought I understood my place in my family. I was the reliable one, the steady one, the one who made sensible choices while my younger brother Mike bounced between apartments and relationships, always needing just one more bailout, one more chance. I work as a pastry chef at Thornfield Restaurant in downtown Portland. It's a good job with a respected establishment, but I've always dreamed of having my own place. A bakery, where I could create the kinds of pastries and breads that connect people to memories, to comfort, to each other. I'd been saving for 5 years, working doubles and catering gigs, building my credit score and perfecting my business plan. The day everything changed started normally enough. April showers tapped against the windows of my modest one-bedroom apartment as I prepared for my meeting with the loan officer at First Regional Bank. I'd laid out my charcoal gray blazer, professional but not stuffy, and was reviewing my presentation one final time. The espresso machine on my counter hissed and steamed as I brewed my morning ritual, the rich aroma filling my small kitchen. My phone rang just as I was pouring the coffee into my travel mug. Neil Adams, the loan officer I'd been working with for the past month. I felt a flutter of anticipation as I answered. "Sarah? Neil Adams here. Do you have a moment?" Something in his tone made my stomach clench. Loan officers who are about to approve your application don't call with that tentative note in their voice. "Of course," I said, setting down my mug. "Is there a problem with my application?" "Well, yes. There's a significant mortgage debt showing on your credit report that wasn't disclosed in your application materials. It's putting your debt-to-income ratio well outside our lending parameters." I frowned, perching on one of the stools at my kitchen counter. There must be some mistake. I don't have a mortgage. "According to the credit report, you're the primary holder of a $425,000 mortgage for a property in Lakewood Heights. It was initiated 18 months ago." Lakewood Heights, my parents' neighborhood, the house I grew up in. "That's impossible," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, a cold certainty was settling in my chest. "Can you tell me who else is on the loan?" "The report shows it's co-signed by Robert and Linda Mitchell, my parents." The room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. "There's been a mistake," I repeated. "I never signed for any mortgage." Neil's sigh carried through the phone. "I'd suggest you pull your full credit report immediately and contact the lender if there's an error. Unfortunately, until this is resolved, we can't move forward with your loan application." After hanging up, I sat motionless on the stool, my carefully planned day crumbling around me. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows like an accusation. Mechanically, I opened my laptop and navigated to the credit monitoring service I subscribed to, part of my meticulous financial planning. There it was, a $425,000 mortgage from Liberty National Bank, opened 18 months ago, with my name listed as primary borrower. Monthly payments were current. That was something at least. but the massive debt sat on my credit report like a boulder. Memories began filtering back with sickening clarity. My father's new truck, appearing in the driveway last Christmas. "Business is good," he'd said with a wink when I admired it. My mother's extensive kitchen renovation with the marble countertops she'd always wanted. Their surprise Alaskan cruise for their 30th anniversary. All while I worked 60-hour weeks, pinching pennies to save for my bakery. I scrolled through my phone to recent messages from my mother. There it was, from just 3 weeks ago. "Dad and I are so proud of you, honey. You're so responsible with money. You get that from my side of the family." The emoji seemed to mock me now. With trembling fingers, I called Liberty National Bank. After navigating the automated system and verifying my identity, I asked about the loan. "Yes, Ms. Mitchell, I'm showing a home equity loan on the property at 1542 Maple Avenue, Lakewood Heights. The loan was originated 18 months ago with you as primary borrower and Robert and Linda Mitchell as co-signers." "I never signed for this loan," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "I never authorized anything." "I understand your concern," the representative said with practiced sympathy. "If you believe there's been an error, you'll need to visit a branch, in person with identification to discuss the matter." I thanked her and ended the call, then sat in the sudden silence of my apartment. Outside, a garbage truck rumbled down the street, the hydraulic whine of its lift momentarily drowning out the rain. Normal sounds from a normal world that suddenly felt completely foreign. My parents had taken out a mortgage in my name, without asking, without telling me. They had forged my signature and stolen my identity as casually as borrowing a sweater. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, changed out of my interview clothes into jeans and a sweater, and drove through the rain to the county records office. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I requested the deed and mortgage documents for my parents' address. The clerk, a middle-aged man with reading glasses perched on his nose, didn't even look up as he processed my request. 20 minutes later, I sat at a scarred wooden table, staring at irrefutable evidence. Page after page of legal documents, all bearing what purported to be my signature alongside my parents'. Except it wasn't my signature. The resemblance was close enough to fool a bank employee who didn't know me. But it wasn't mine. The S looped too dramatically. The M was too angular. The overall slant was wrong. I knew immediately that my mother had done the forgery. She'd always been proud of her handwriting, had even taken calligraphy classes at the community center. I remembered her practicing my father's signature once when he was too busy to sign school permission forms. "It's not forgery if you have permission," she'd said with a laugh. Apparently, she hadn't bothered to get mine. I made copies of everything, the mechanical rhythm of the copier providing a strange comfort as I tried to process what I was seeing. On my way out, I passed a bulletin board covered with business cards and flyers. A pale blue card caught my eye. Patricia Alvarez, attorney at law, specializing in identity theft and financial fraud. I took it, tucking it into my wallet like a talisman. In my car, I sat with the engine running, rain streaming down the windshield, blurring the world outside. I needed to confront my parents. The thought made me physically ill, but I needed to hear them explain. Maybe, just maybe, there was some explanation that would make sense of this betrayal. I texted both of them. "Need to talk about something. Important. Can I come by tonight?" Mom replied immediately. "Of course, sweetheart. Dad's making his famous chili. Come around 6. Love you." The casual normality of her response, the endearment, the heart emoji, they hit me like physical blows. How could she act so normal when she had done something so profoundly violating? I drove back to my apartment in a daze, the wipers keeping rhythm with my racing thoughts. Once home, I spread the documents across my small dining table, reading and rereading them as if they might suddenly reveal this was all a misunderstanding. But the more I looked, the clearer the betrayal became. The loan had been taken out 18 months ago, right around the time my parents had started their home improvements. The money hadn't gone to pay medical bills or cover some emergency. It had funded a lifestyle upgrade. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. New kitchen, new truck, luxury vacation. All while I worked doubles to save for my bakery. All while I carefully built the credit they had now compromised. This wasn't a desperate act born of necessity. This was calculated, deliberate, selfish. I'd always been the responsible one in our family. While Mike bounced between jobs and apartments, always needing bailouts, I'd worked steadily since I was 16. When financial discussions came up at family gatherings, my father would proudly pat my shoulder. Sarah always has her head on straight about money. Now I understood. I wasn't valued for my responsibility. I was valued for my exploitability. I thought about all the times I'd adjusted my schedule to help them. The endless holidays spent cooking and cleaning while Mike showed up for dinner and left right after. The weekends I'd spent helping Mom with her online craft store, setting up her website, photographing her products. The times I'd picked up the check at dinner because "You're doing so well right now, sweetheart." And all the while, they'd been saddling me with nearly $500,000 in debt without even asking. Tears burned in my eyes, but I blinked them back. This wasn't about crying. This was about what I was going to do next. At exactly 6 p.m., I knocked on my parents' door, the manila envelope of documents tucked under my arm. I'd rehearsed what I would say, how I would remain calm, how I would give them a chance to explain. But when Mom opened the door, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure at seeing me, words momentarily failed me. "Sarah, perfect timing." Dad just took the cornbread out of the oven. The house looked different to me now. Not just the new stainless steel appliances or the gleaming marble countertops, but in some essential way I couldn't articulate. This place that had always been home suddenly felt like a stranger's house. Dad appeared from the kitchen, looking relaxed in a new golf shirt I hadn't seen before. "There's my girl," he said, coming in for a hug that I barely returned. "Everything okay? You look serious." I didn't smile. "We need to talk." We sat at the dining table, also new since my last visit, with our bowls of chili untouched in front of us. I placed the envelope on the table and pulled out the mortgage documents. "I need you to explain this," I said simply. The silence was immediate and heavy. My father's face darkened while my mother's drained of color. They exchanged a quick glance that confirmed everything. "Where did you get those?" Dad finally asked, his voice low. "From the county records office. Public documents. What I want to know is how my name and signature got on a mortgage I knew nothing about." Mom reached out, her hand trembling slightly. "Honey, it's not what you think." "What exactly do you think I think, Mom? Because what I think is that you forged my signature on loan documents. What I think is that you committed fraud using my name and my credit." Dad's face flushed. "Now hold on. That's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's a fact. I have the documents right here." "Sarah," Mom said, her voice taking on the soothing tone she'd used when I was a child with a scraped knee. "We were going to tell you. We just needed to consolidate some debt, and our credit wasn't quite good enough for the rate we wanted." "It's not like you're paying anything," Dad added. "We make all the payments. You don't even notice it." "Until I tried to get a business loan and got denied because there's a $425,000 mortgage in my name that I never signed for." My voice broke, but I pressed on. "How could you do this? Do you realize this is a crime?" Mom's eyes filled with tears. "We're family. Families help each other." "Help? You didn't ask for help. You stole my identity." Dad's voice hardened. "That's enough. We've always supported you. When you wanted to go to that expensive culinary school, did we complain? When you needed a car in college, who bought it?" I stared at him in disbelief. I paid you back for that car. Every dollar. With interest. And culinary school was mostly scholarships and loans that I paid off myself. The point is, Mom interjected, we're family. This loan helps all of us. The house will stay in the family. Your name on the mortgage means you have a stake in it too. A stake I never asked for. A debt I never agreed to. Dad pushed his chair back and stood. I think you're overreacting. Sleep on it. You'll see this isn't as big a deal as you're making it out to be. But it was a big deal. And as I looked at their faces, defensive, dismissive, completely unwilling to acknowledge what they'd done, I realized this conversation wasn't going to fix anything. I gathered the documents and stood up. I'll be talking to a lawyer about this, I said quietly. A lawyer? Mom gasped. You would sue your own parents? You forged my name on legal documents, Mom. What did you think would happen when I found out? Dad's face hardened. You walk out that door to talk to a lawyer, don't bother coming back. Family doesn't do that to family. The irony of his statement was so staggering, I almost laughed. Instead, I looked him directly in the eyes and said, That's exactly my point, Dad. Family doesn't do this to family. I walked out, my dinner untouched, the weight of their betrayal heavier than the documents in my hands. That night was the longest of my life. I sat on my small balcony until 3 a.m., watching the occasional car pass on the street below, trying to process what had happened. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a clean, damp smell and puddles that reflected the streetlights. My phone lit, up with texts from my mother, alternating between guilt trips, excuses, and pleas to talk again, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. This wasn't going away, and pretending it hadn't happened wouldn't fix my credit or my loan application. If my parents wouldn't acknowledge what they'd done, I would have to seek resolution another way. I called Patricia Alvarez's office and scheduled a consultation for that afternoon. Her office was in a converted Victorian house in an older part of the city. Inside, it was surprisingly modern. Clean lines, minimal decoration, degrees, and certifications covering one wall. Patricia herself was a woman in her early 50s with salt and pepper hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. She listened intently as I explained the situation, taking notes and occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, she put down her pen and looked at me directly. Sarah, what your parents did is illegal. It's fraud, identity theft, and forgery. These are serious crimes that carry significant penalties. I swallowed hard. What are my options? You have several, but they all start with the same step: filing a police report for identity theft. Without that, you can't dispute the debt or clear your name. The thought of filing a police report against my own parents made my stomach twist. And if I do that? Then we can petition to have the debt removed from your credit. We'll send formal fraud notifications to the credit bureaus and the lender. You'll need to sign an affidavit stating you didn't authorize the loan. Will my parents go to jail? I asked quietly. Patricia's expression softened slightly. That depends on whether the district attorney decides to press charges. First-time offenders sometimes get probation, especially in family cases. But I won't lie to you, there will be legal consequences. I thought about my business loan, my dreams of opening the bakery, all the years I'd worked toward that goal. I thought about my parents' dismissal of what they'd done, their expectation that I would simply accept it because we were family. What would you do if they were your parents? I asked. Patricia didn't hesitate. I'd protect myself. Family is important, but not at the cost of your entire financial future. This isn't a one-time mistake. This is a calculated decision they made repeatedly, signing your name multiple times, knowing exactly what they were doing. Something shifted inside me, resignation giving way to resolve. I nodded. Let's file the police report. The police station was busier than I expected. I waited on a hard plastic chair for nearly an hour before a detective could take my statement. Detective Wilson was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened without judgment as I explained what had happened, showing her the loan documents and the obvious forgery of my signature. "You're doing the right thing," she told me when I finished, my voice shaking slightly. "I know it doesn't feel that way, but you are." I walked out with a copy of the police report, official documentation of my parents' betrayal. It felt both terrible and somehow liberating. Over the next 2 weeks, Patricia and I put everything in motion. We sent certified letters to the credit bureaus and the mortgage lender, disputing the debt with the police report attached. We filed a formal complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We prepared an affidavit detailing exactly what had happened and how I'd discovered the fraud. Each step was difficult, but each one also made me stronger. I was no longer just a victim. I was actively reclaiming my financial identity. Meanwhile, the messages from my parents evolved from hurt and defensive to angry and threatening. Dad texted that I was ruining the family and being selfish. Mom left tearful voicemails about how I was breaking her heart. My brother Mike called me, clearly sent as their emissary. "Just drop it, Sarah," he urged. "They'll lose the house. If you do this, where will they live?" "They lived there for 20 years without a mortgage," I pointed out. "They didn't need to do this." "But they did do it, and now you need to be the bigger person. That's what you're good at, right? Being responsible?" The manipulation was so obvious it almost made me laugh. Responsible doesn't mean being a doormat, Mike. They committed fraud using my name. It's just paperwork. It's not like they stole actual money from you. They stole my future. My business loan was denied because of this. He scoffed. "So you're choosing some hypothetical bakery over your actual family?" I ended the call there, but his words stayed with me. Was I overreacting? Was I placing my dreams above my family's welfare? Then I remembered Patricia's words. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a calculated decision they made repeatedly, and I knew I was doing what I had to do. 3 weeks after filing the police report, I received a court summons in the mail. The district attorney had decided to pursue charges against my parents for identity theft and fraud. There would be a preliminary hearing the following month. That same afternoon, as I was walking up the steps to my apartment building with groceries balanced in my arms, I spotted a familiar figure waiting by the entrance. Aunt Carol, my mother's older sister, straightened up when she saw me, her mouth set in a grim line. "We need to talk," she said, not bothering with a greeting. I sighed, juggling my grocery bags. "Let me put these away first." She followed me inside, her disapproval radiating like heat as she surveyed my modest apartment. I could almost hear her thoughts, how small it was, how I could have afforded better if I'd just accepted my parents' help over the years. I put the groceries away methodically, giving myself time to prepare for whatever was coming. When I finally turned to face her, she was standing in my small living room, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Your mother hasn't slept in days," she began without preamble. "Your father's construction clients are starting to hear rumors. Do you have any idea what you're doing to this family?" I leaned against the kitchen counter. "I didn't do anything to this family, Aunt Carol. They committed fraud using my name. It was a misunderstanding." She threw her hands up. "They just didn't think you'd mind. They assumed you'd want to help them. By forging my signature? By taking out a mortgage without telling me? They were embarrassed." Her voice rose. "Robert's business had some setbacks. Linda didn't want everyone knowing they were struggling. Is that so terrible, wanting to maintain some dignity?" I felt a flicker of doubt. My parents hadn't mentioned financial troubles. If they needed help, they could have asked me. Aunt Carol scoffed. "And what would you have said?" "No, of course. You've always been so wrapped up in your own plans, your precious bakery. Meanwhile, the people who raised you, who supported your dreams needed help. I would have helped them if they'd asked, I said quietly. But this wasn't asking. This was taking. It's just a signature. It's just bureaucracy. The payments are being made. You're not out a single penny. I lost my business loan because of this. The bakery I've been working toward for years is now on hold indefinitely. She waved her hand dismissively. So you wait a little longer. Family comes first, Sarah. The casual dismissal of my dreams, the assumption that my plans mattered less than my parents' wants, it crystallized something. For me, this wasn't just about the mortgage. This was about a lifetime of subtle devaluation, of my boundaries being treated as optional, of my goals being considered secondary. Family should come first for everyone, I said evenly, including my parents. They should have thought about that before they committed a crime using my name. Aunt Carol's face hardened. So that's it? You're really going through with this? Pressing charges against your own parents? I didn't press charges. The district attorney did, after reviewing the evidence. You could drop it. You could tell them it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was fraud. She stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head slowly. I always thought you were different, Sarah. The sensible one. The level-headed one. But this? Taking your own parents to court? What kind of daughter does that? The kind who was never asked. The kind who was used. The kind who's trying to protect herself. But I didn't say those things. Instead, I simply said, I'm sorry you see it that way. She gathered her purse, heading for the door. Your mother is heartbroken. If you had any decency, you'd call her. After she left, I sank onto my sofa, suddenly exhausted. My phone showed 3 missed calls from my mother and a text from Mike. Way to go. Mom's been crying all day. Hope you're happy. I wasn't happy. I was sad and angry and conflicted. But beneath all those emotions was a growing certainty. I was doing what I had to do. That evening, after a shift at the restaurant that I'd barely gotten through, I drove to the beach, a place I often went to think. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. I kicked off my shoes and walked along the damp sand, letting the cold waves occasionally lap at my feet. A young couple passed by, hand in hand, laughing, at some private joke. A father helped his small daughter build a sandcastle near the water's edge. Normal people living normal lives, untouched by the kind of betrayal that had upended mine. My phone buzzed in my pocket, another call from my mother. I silenced it without looking, focusing instead on the horizon where the sun was melting into the ocean. For the first time since this began, I found myself wondering what my life would look like on the other side of this mess. Would I still have a family? Would they ever understand why I'd done this? Would I ever trust them again? I didn't have answers yet, but as I watched the tide erase footprints on the sand, I knew there was no going back to how things were before. Something fundamental had shifted. The only way was forward. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I took the day off work, dressed in the most professional outfit I owned, a charcoal pencil skirt and cream blouse I usually saved for catering consultations, and met Patricia outside the courthouse. Ready? She asked, her briefcase in hand. I nodded, surprising myself with how calm I felt. Ready? As we approached the courthouse steps, I saw them, my parents, standing with their lawyer, looking simultaneously defiant and afraid. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, my father's jaw clenched tight. They looked older somehow than they had just weeks before. A small part of me wanted to run to them, to say we could fix this, to return to the comfort of family as I'd always known it. But that family had been an illusion, built on the understanding that my needs would always come second. We passed each other without speaking, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air between us. Inside, the courtroom was less dramatic than I'd imagined. No towering bench or imposing architecture, just a functional government space with fluorescent lighting and uncomfortable seating. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper. I sat beside Patricia, focusing on my breathing as other cases were called before ours. My parents sat 3 rows behind us with their attorney, a balding man in an expensive suit who kept whispering to them. When our case was called, Patricia and I moved to the front of the courtroom. The opposing counsel joined us. My parents remained seated, looking small and uncertain. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, peered at us over reading glasses. "This is the preliminary hearing for State versus Robert and Linda Mitchell, case number 47829, charges of identity theft and fraud. Is the state ready to proceed?" The district attorney, a young woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Is the defense ready?" My parents' lawyer rose. "Yes, Your Honor. Though we'd like to note for the record that we've attempted to resolve this matter privately, given the family relationship involved." The judge raised an eyebrow. "So noted. Please proceed." The district attorney outlined the case, the forged signatures, the loan documents, the evidence that I had no knowledge of or involvement with the mortgage until discovering it during a credit check. She presented the police report and my affidavit. My parents' lawyer argued that there was no real victim. The payments were being made. The house was still in the family. There was no intent to defraud me personally. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "this is essentially a family misunderstanding that has been blown out of proportion. The Mitchells simply believed their daughter would be willing to help them secure better loan terms. The house will eventually be part of her inheritance anyway." The judge listened to both sides without expression. When both lawyers had finished, she looked directly at my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, do you dispute that you signed your daughter's name to these documents without her knowledge or consent?" Their lawyer started to speak, but the judge held up her hand. "I'd like to hear directly from the defendants." My father cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we didn't think of it as fraud. Sarah is part of our family. The house will eventually be hers anyway. We just needed better terms on the loan, and her credit helped with that." "So that's a no? You don't dispute signing her name?" "Well, no, but Mrs. Mitchell?" My mother's voice was barely audible. "No, Your Honor." The judge nodded, then turned to me. "Ms. Mitchell, your parents' actions have directly impacted your credit and your financial opportunities. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor. I was denied a business loan because of the debt showing on my credit." She turned back to my parents, and her expression hardened. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I want to be very clear about something. Family relationships do not override individual legal rights. Your daughter is not an extension of yourselves. She is a separate person with her own financial identity and future." My father started to speak, but the judge continued. "What you did was not a favor to her. It was not a family arrangement. It was fraud. It was theft of identity. And it was a profound breach of trust against someone who had every reason to believe you would protect her interests, not exploit them." The courtroom was completely silent. I felt a tear slide down my cheek but didn't move to wipe it away. "This court finds sufficient evidence to proceed with charges. Arraignment will be scheduled for next month." She looked at my parents again. "I strongly suggest you consider a plea arrangement that includes full removal of Ms. Mitchell's name from the fraudulent loan and complete restoration of her credit. That would reflect genuine remorse and might influence sentencing considerations." As we left the courtroom, I felt lighter somehow, as if the judge's words had lifted a weight I'd been carrying. She had seen me, not as a daughter failing her duties, but as a person whose rights had been violated. For the first time since this began, I felt truly validated. Outside, standing on the courthouse steps in the bright morning sunshine, Patricia squeezed my arm. "That went as well as it could have," she said. The judge clearly understands the violation that occurred. I nodded, unable to find words. Across the plaza, I could see my parents huddled with their lawyer, my mother dabbing. At her eyes with a tissue, my father's shoulders slumped. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we wait for their next move. Based on the judge's comments, their lawyer will likely advise them to take a plea deal. If they're smart, they'll agree to refinance the house solely in their names and work with the credit bureaus to remove the loan from your record. And if they don't?" Patricia's expression was serious. "Then we proceed to trial, and they face the possibility of jail time." The thought made my stomach clench. Despite everything, I didn't want to see my parents in prison. I wanted my financial identity restored, my name cleared, my boundaries respected, but not at that cost. "Do you think they'll take the deal?" I asked. "With the evidence we have? They'd be foolish not to. But family dynamics can make people do foolish things." She patted my shoulder. "Try not to worry about it tonight. This was a good day for your case." I thanked her and headed to my car, deliberately taking a path that wouldn't cross with my parents. As I drove away from the courthouse, I realized I was hungry for the first time in days. I stopped at a small diner I'd never visited before, one where no family memories lurked, and ordered breakfast even though it was nearly noon. As I waited for my food, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my brother, a text from Aunt Carol that I didn't open, and an email notification that made my heart skip. First Regional Bank, responding to my request to reconsider my business loan application once the fraudulent mortgage was resolved. They were willing to put my application on hold rather than denying it outright, contingent on documentation that the mortgage issue had been fully resolved. It wasn't approval, but it was hope. A small light at the end of what had seemed like an endless tunnel. I was savoring my first bite of pancakes when the bell above the diner door jingled. I glanced up automatically, then froze. My father stood in the entrance, scanning the room. When his eyes found me, he hesitated, then walked slowly to my table. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. I nodded silently, setting down my fork. He sat, looking uncomfortable in his court clothes, his tie loosened slightly. Up close, I could see new lines around his eyes, a tiredness that hadn't been there before. "Your mother wanted to come too," he said. "But I thought it might be easier if it was just me first." I waited, not making it easier for him. He sighed heavily. "The lawyer says we should take a plea deal." "That seems wise. They want us to refinance the house in our names only, pay for credit repair services for you, accept probation." He rubbed his hand over his face. "Sarah, we never meant for this to happen." "For what to happen, Dad? For you to commit fraud, or for me to find out about it?" He flinched. "Both, I guess. Things got tight with the business. The housing market slowed down. Construction projects were getting canceled. We needed to consolidate some debt, but our credit wasn't good enough for the rates we wanted. So you used mine without asking. We were going to tell you after it was done. We thought you'd understand once we explained. But then time passed, and it seemed easier to just not bring it up. While you renovated the kitchen and bought a new truck." He had the grace to look ashamed. "Those were mistakes. I see that now. Now that you're facing criminal charges. That's not fair. We're your parents. We've supported you your whole life. And that gives you the right to steal my identity? We didn't think of it as stealing. We thought of it as family, helping family." I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to understand how he could still not see the fundamental violation. "Dad, if you needed help, why didn't you just ask me? Would you have co-signed a loan that size?" "Probably not," I admitted, "because it would have prevented me from getting my own business loan, which is exactly what happened anyway. See? This way, you didn't have to make that choice. We just made it for me, I finished, without my knowledge or consent. He fell silent, staring down at the table. Are you going to take the plea deal? I asked finally. He nodded. Your mother and I talked about it. We don't want this to go further. We don't want to hurt you more than we already have. The admission that they had hurt me, that they recognized that much at least, loosened something tight in my chest. I don't want to hurt you either, Dad. I never did. I just wanted my name off a loan I never agreed to. I understand that now. He hesitated. The thing is, Sarah, refinancing won't be easy. Our credit still isn't great. The interest rate will be much higher without you on the loan. We might have to sell the house. I understood then why he'd sought me out. Even now, he was hoping I might relent, might agree to stay on the loan to save them from consequences. I'm sorry to hear that, I said evenly. But that's a decision you'll have to make. Disappointment flickered across his face, quickly masked. Of course, you're right. He stood up, reaching for his wallet. Let me get your breakfast. I've got it, I said. I can take care of myself. I always have. He nodded slowly. You have. You've always been the strong one. He turned to go, then paused. For what it's worth, I am sorry. We both are. Not just about getting caught, about betraying your trust. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was something. I appreciate that, I said. I hope the plea deal works out. After he left, I finished my breakfast slowly, thinking about what had just happened. It wasn't the full recognition I'd hoped for, not a complete understanding of how deeply they'd violated my trust. But it was a start, a crack in the defensive wall they'd built around their actions. And for now, that would have to be enough. The legal process dragged on, moving at the glacial pace of bureaucracy. My parents accepted the plea deal. They refinanced the house solely in their names, at a much higher interest rate, as my father had predicted. They were sentenced to 2 years of probation and ordered to pay for professional credit repair services to restore my credit rating. The hardest part wasn't the legal proceedings. It was the silence that fell between us. Family gatherings happened without me. Thanksgiving came and went. As Christmas approached, I received a tentative text from my mother, asking if I might consider joining them. I declined politely, spending the holiday instead with friends from work who were hosting an orphan Christmas for those without family plans. I threw myself into my work at the restaurant, picking up extra shifts, volunteering for catering events. I started teaching a weekend pastry class at the community center, partly for the extra income, partly to keep my dream alive while I waited for my credit to be repaired. Through it all, I kept thinking about the judge's words. Your daughter is not an extension of yourselves. She is a separate person with her own financial identity and future. Those words became a mantra of sorts, a reminder that I had done the right thing, that standing up for myself wasn't selfish or cruel, but necessary. 4 months after the hearing, my brother Mike called me. We hadn't spoken since his angry text after the preliminary hearing. Hey, he said, his voice uncertain. How are you? I'm okay, I replied, cautious. How are you? Managing. Look, I owe you an apology. I said some things I shouldn't have. I waited, not making it easier for him. He sighed. I didn't understand at first. I thought you were overreacting. But then I started thinking about how I'd feel if someone used my name on a loan without telling me. Even Mom and Dad, and I wouldn't be okay with it either. The admission surprised me. Mike had always been their defender, the one who made excuses for their behavior. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, well, the thing is, they're selling the house. The new mortgage payment is too high for them to manage. They're looking at condos, something smaller. I processed this information. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? The edge in his voice suggested he didn't believe me. "Yes, Mike, I am. I never wanted them to lose their house. I just wanted my name off a fraudulent loan. I know that now." He paused. "Anyway, I thought you should know. And they're different since all this happened. More thoughtful, maybe. Less likely to make assumptions. Mom keeps saying she wishes she could go back and do things differently." "That's good to hear." "Yeah. So, anyway, once this is all sorted out, once they've moved and everything, maybe we could all try to, I don't know, start over somehow? Not pretend it didn't happen, but find a way forward?" The olive branch was unexpected. "Maybe," I said, not ready to commit, but not wanting to close the door either. "Let's see how things go." After we hung up, I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope that something positive might emerge from all this pain. Not a return to what was, that was impossible, but perhaps something new, something healthier, with clearer boundaries and mutual respect. The next day, I received an email notification I'd been waiting for. My credit report had been updated. The fraudulent mortgage removed, my excellent score restored. I immediately logged into my account at First Regional Bank and checked the status of my business loan application. Under final review, the status read, "Not an approval yet, but a step closer to the dream I'd worked so hard for." That evening, I pulled out the notebook where I'd sketched my bakery plans, the layout, the menu ideas, even a rough draft of the logo. For months, it had sat untouched, too painful to look at. Now I flipped through it, allowing myself to feel the excitement again to envision the future I'd been working toward. My phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. "Sarah, it's Patricia Alvarez. Just checking in. How are you doing?" I smiled, touched by her thoughtfulness. "Much better. Credit. Restored. Loan application under review. Parents taking responsibility. Thank you for everything." Her reply came quickly. "You did the hard part, standing up for yourself. Not everyone finds the courage. Keep me posted on the bakery." Later, as I was preparing dinner, another text arrived. This one from my mother. "We've found a condo we like. Smaller but nice. Fresh start. I know we have a long way to go to earn back your trust, but I hope someday you might visit us there. Love you always, Mom." I read it twice, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. There was still hurt, still anger, but there was also a tentative hope that whatever came next might be built on a more honest foundation. I typed a response, choosing my words carefully. "I'm glad you found a place. A fresh start sounds good. Give me some time, but yes, someday I'd like to visit. Take care." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an opening, a small crack in the wall between us. And for now, that was enough. 6 weeks later, on a crisp spring morning, I stood in front of a small storefront on Maple Street, clutching a set of keys and barely containing my excitement. The loan had finally been approved. After all the setbacks, all the heartache, all the legal battles, Sarah's sweet spot was about to become reality. The space needed work, outdated fixtures, a kitchen that would need significant upgrades, walls that desperately needed fresh paint. But as I walked through the empty rooms, I could see it all in my mind's eye. The display cases filled with pastries, the small cafe tables by the window, the warm lighting that would make customers feel welcome. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Diane, my new landlord. "All set with the keys? Any questions?" I snapped a quick photo of the empty space and sent it with my reply. "All good. Starting renovations next week. Thank you for everything." Diane had been a godsend. When I'd told her about my situation during our initial meeting, being transparent about why my loan approval had been delayed, she'd been unexpectedly understanding. My sister went through something similar with her ex-husband, she'd confided. Identity theft is no joke, especially when it's someone you trusted. Her empathy had made me feel less alone, less like the unreasonable daughter who'd taken her parents to court, and more like someone who'd stood up for herself in a difficult situation. I pocketed my phone and continued my inspection, making notes on my tablet as I went. The kitchen would need new wiring to support the commercial ovens and mixers. The front counter would need to be rebuilt. The bathroom needed to be made ADA compliant. The to-do list was daunting, but it wasn't deterring me. After everything I'd been through, this felt like the start of something hopeful, something that was entirely mine. The bell above the door jingled, and I turned to see Patricia standing in the entrance, holding a small gift bag. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, smiling. "I was in the neighborhood and wanted to see your new place and bring a little housewarming gift." "You're not interrupting at all," I assured her, genuinely happy to see her. Over the months of legal proceedings, Patricia had become more than just my attorney. She'd become a mentor, even a friend. She looked around approvingly. "Great location. Foot traffic, nearby businesses, plenty of parking. The rent's a bit higher than I'd budgeted for, but the visibility is worth it." She nodded, then handed me the gift bag. "Open it." Inside was a small brass plaque that read, "Sarah's Sweet Spot, Esther 2025, Dreams Deferred but Not Denied." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Patricia, this is perfect. Thank you. I thought you might hang it by the register. A reminder of what you overcame to get here." I hugged her, this woman who'd helped me navigate the darkest period of my life. "I don't know how to thank you for everything." She pulled back, her expression serious. "You don't need to thank me. You did the hard work. Standing up to family is never easy." She glanced around the space again. "This is your thank you, building the life you deserve." After she left, I stayed in the empty shop until sunset, walking from room to room, planning and dreaming. This space represented more than just a business to me. It was tangible proof that I'd made the right choice, that protecting myself had been necessary and worthwhile. As darkness fell, I locked up and headed home, stopping at the grocery store on the way. As I was selecting apples in the produce section, I heard a familiar voice that made me freeze. "Sarah?" I turned to see my mother standing a few feet away, a shopping basket hanging from her arm. She looked different, her hair shorter, her clothes simpler than the stylish outfits she'd favored before. The large diamond earrings she'd always worn were gone, replaced by simple studs. "Mom," I managed, my heart racing. We hadn't seen each other in person since the courthouse. "How are you?" she asked, tentative, as if afraid I might walk away. "I'm good," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "Just got the keys to my bakery space today, actually." Her face lit up, then quickly clouded with what looked like shame. "That's wonderful. I know how hard you've worked for that." An awkward silence fell between us. Around us, other shoppers moved through the aisles, oblivious to the painful history hanging in the air. "How's the condo?" I asked finally, because it seemed impossible to just walk away. "It's nice. Smaller. Like your father said, but less maintenance. We're on the 3rd floor, so we have a decent view." She hesitated. "We finished moving in last weekend." "That's good." She nodded, shifting her weight from one foot to another. "Your father's back to work. Smaller projects now, but steady." "I'm glad to hear that." Another silence, heavier this time. "Sarah," she began, then stopped, seeming to gather her courage. "I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why we did what we did." I hadn't expected that. That's really good, Mom. She's helping me see patterns I wasn't aware of before. How I never really saw you as separate from me. How I justified things because I thought I knew what was best for everyone. Her eyes welled with tears. I'm not saying this to make excuses. There's no excuse for what we did. I just want you to know I'm trying to understand so I don't ever hurt you like that again. The simple acknowledgement that they had hurt me, that what they did was wrong, not just illegal but wrong, was something I'd been waiting to hear for months. Thank you for telling me that, I said softly. She brushed away a tear. I should let you finish your shopping. It was good to see you, Sarah. You too, Mom. As she turned to go, an impulse seized me. Mom? She looked back, hope flashing across her face. The bakery. The grand opening will be in about 6 weeks once the renovations are done, if you wanted to come. We'd love to, she said quickly, then caught herself. Or just me if that's easier. Whatever you're comfortable with. Maybe just you this time, I said. We can take things slowly. She nodded, understanding. Slowly is good. After she left, I stood in the produce section for a long time, an apple forgotten in my hand, processing what had just happened. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. The hurt was still there, but it felt like the first step on a road I hadn't been sure we'd ever find. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of contractors, permit applications, equipment deliveries, and late nights planning menus and marketing strategies. I'd quit my job at the restaurant to focus on getting the bakery ready, living frugally off my savings and occasionally picking up catering gigs to make ends meet. The work was exhausting, but exhilarating. Every decision, from the color of the walls, a warm buttercream, to the font on the menus, simple but elegant, was mine to make. No one's approval needed, no one's preferences to consider above my own. After a lifetime of accommodation, the freedom was intoxicating. A week before the grand opening, I hosted a private tasting for friends and a few influential local food bloggers. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Vivian Chen, whose food blog had thousands of followers, posted pictures of my signature lavender honey scones and salted caramel brownies with a glowing review. Portland's newest bakery is worth the wait. Sarah Mitchell's creations aren't just delicious. They tell a story of passion and perseverance. Reading those words as I cleaned up after the tasting, I felt a surge of pride. I had done this. Despite every obstacle, every setback, I had created something meaningful. My phone rang. Mike, my brother. We'd spoken a few times since his apology, brief conversations that carefully avoided sensitive topics. Hey, I answered, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder as I wiped down the counter. The place looks amazing, he said without preamble. I just drove by and saw the lights on. The sign looks fantastic. I smiled, glancing up at the hand-painted sign above the door. Thanks. It's coming together. Listen, I know we haven't really talked much lately, but I was wondering, do you need any help with the opening? I could take the day off work, be an extra pair of hands. The offer caught me off guard. Mike and I had always lived separate lives. Our relationship defined more by our roles in the family than by any real connection. That would be great, actually, I said, surprising myself. I could use help with crowd control and running orders to the tables. Consider it done. He paused. And Sarah, I'm really proud of you. For all of it. Standing up for yourself, pursuing your dream, even being willing to try with Mom and Dad again. His words touched me unexpectedly. Thanks, Mike. That means a lot. After we hung up, I finished closing the bakery, turning off lights and double-checking the new security system. As I locked the front door, I caught my reflection in the glass, smiling, eyes bright with anticipation rather than clouded with hurt. I wasn't the same person who'd received that devastating phone call about the fraudulent mortgage. I was stronger now, more certain of my boundaries, more confident in my right to protect myself. The journey had been painful, but it had shaped me in ways I was only beginning to appreciate. The morning of the grand opening dawned clear and bright. I'd been at the bakery since 4 a.m., baking the first batches of croissants, muffins, and breads. By 8:30, everything was ready. Display cases filled with pastries, coffee brewing, flowers arranged on the tables. Mike had arrived at 8 immediately, making himself useful by setting up the outdoor sandwich board and arranging the patio seating. "Nervous?" he asked, joining me behind the counter as we waited for the clock to hit 9 a.m., the official opening time. "Terrified," I admitted. "What? If no one comes?" he snorted. "Have you seen the line forming outside?" I peeked through the blinds. Sure enough, a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. Among them, I spotted my mother, standing slightly apart from the others, clutching her purse nervously. "Mom's here," I said quietly. Mike nodded. "She's been talking about it all week. She might have told the entire condo complex about her daughter, the baker." I smiled despite myself. "Really?" "Really. She's proud of you, Sarah. We all are." At precisely 9 a.m., I unlocked the door and flipped the sign to "Open." The first customers streamed in, exclaiming over the displays and the decor. Mike manned the register while I prepared orders, falling into an easy rhythm despite never having worked together before. My mother waited until the initial rush had subsided before approaching the counter. She looked around the bakery with undisguised admiration. "Sarah, it's beautiful. Truly beautiful." "Thanks, Mom. What can I get you?" "Whatever you recommend. I trust your taste." I prepared a plate with samples of my favorite creations: a lavender scone, a slice of lemon tart, a chocolate croissant. When I handed it to her, our fingers brushed briefly. "This is on the house," I said. She shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not. I'm paying full price like everyone else." She placed a $20 bill on the counter. "And I'm leaving a tip. This is your business, Sarah. I respect that." The simple acknowledgement that this was mine, that she respected my independence, meant more than any elaborate apology could have. "Thank you," I said, and we both knew I wasn't just thanking her for the $20. She took her plate to a small table by the window, where she was eventually joined by 2 women I didn't recognize. Neighbors from the condo, I guessed. Throughout the morning, I watched her proudly point me out to them, saw her face light up when they seemingly complimented the food. The day passed in a happy blur. By closing time, we'd sold out of nearly everything. My feet ached, my back was sore from bending over the display cases, and I couldn't stop smiling. After the last customer left, Mike helped me clean up, chatting about the day's highlights and planning improvements for tomorrow. "Do you think we need another register?" I wondered aloud. The line got pretty long around lunch. "Maybe. Or just a more efficient system." He tied off a garbage bag. "You know, Dad's pretty good with workflow optimization. That was his specialty in construction management." I stiffened slightly at the mention of our father. While I'd begun cautiously rebuilding a relationship with my mother, I'd had minimal contact with him. Mike noticed my reaction. "Sorry, I wasn't suggesting. I know things are still complicated with Dad." "It's okay," I said, softening. "How is he?" Mike shrugged. "Adjusting. Working less, which is probably good for him. He's started woodworking as a hobby." He hesitated. "He asks about you, about the bakery." I focused on wiping down the espresso machine. "You can tell him it went well, that I appreciate him asking." Mike nodded, understanding that was as much as I could offer right now. We finished cleaning in companionable silence. As I was locking up, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Everything was delicious. So proud of you. Thank you for letting me be part of your special day." I smiled, typing back, "Thanks for coming. It meant a lot." That night, exhausted but satisfied, I soaked in a hot bath, reflecting on the day. The bakery had exceeded My expectations, financially, professionally, and personally. But perhaps the most surprising part had been the tentative steps toward healing with my family. We would never go back to what we were before. Too much had happened. Too many truths had been revealed. But maybe, just maybe, we could build something new. Something healthier, with clearer boundaries and genuine respect. As I slipped into bed, I thought about the brass plaque Patricia had given me. Dreams deferred but not denied. It wasn't just about the bakery. It was about the right to define my own path, to expect respect for my boundaries, to create a life that was authentically mine. For the first time in a long time, I fell asleep without a knot of anxiety in my stomach, without the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. The road ahead wasn't perfectly clear, but I was moving forward, one careful step at a time. The success of the opening day wasn't a fluke. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's Sweet Spot developed a loyal following. My signature items, especially the lavender honey scones and the dark chocolate sea salt cookies, regularly sold out before noon. I hired 2 part-time assistants, culinary students eager to learn and happy to work the early morning shifts. 1 month after opening, I was reviewing the books late one evening when a knock on the door startled me. We'd been closed for hours. Through the glass, I could see my father standing on the sidewalk, looking uncertain. My first instinct was to pretend I hadn't seen him, but after a moment's hesitation, I went to the door and opened it partway. "Dad," I said, neither inviting him in nor sending him away. "I'm sorry to stop by so late," he said. "I was driving home from a friend's and saw the light on." He shifted awkwardly. "I can come back another time if this isn't good." I should have said yes, that another time would be better. But something in his demeanor, the tentative way he stood, so different from the confident father I'd grown up with, made me step back and open the door wider. "I was just finishing up some paperwork," I said. "Come in if you want." He entered cautiously, looking around with obvious admiration. "Your mother told me how nice it was, but seeing it in person," he shook his head. "You've done an amazing job, Sarah." "Thank you." An awkward silence fell between us. I busied myself organizing papers at the counter while he studied the photographs I'd hung on one wall. Black and white images of hands kneading dough, breaking bread, stirring batter. "These are beautiful," he said finally. "Did you take them?" "A friend did, for the website." He nodded, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. "I made something for you, a housewarming gift for the bakery. If you don't like it or don't want it, that's completely fine." Curious despite myself, I took the box. Inside, nestled in a bed of soft cloth, was a set of wooden measuring spoons, each one carved from a different type of wood, the handles inlaid, with delicate patterns. "You made these?" I asked, surprised. He nodded. "Like Mike probably told you, I've been doing woodworking. It helps keep my hands busy, my mind focused on something constructive." I lifted one of the spoons, admiring the craftsmanship. Each one had been sanded to a silky smoothness, the measurement carefully engraved on the handle. "They're beautiful," I said honestly. "They're functional too," he said quickly. "I researched food-safe finishes. They're sealed with pure beeswax and mineral oil. Safe for cooking, though you probably have professional equipment for that." "I'll use them," I promised, touched by the thought and effort he'd put into the gift. "Thank you." He smiled, relief evident in his expression. "I wasn't sure if you'd accept anything from me. I wouldn't have blamed you if you hadn't." I put the spoons back in their box, unsure how to respond. Part of me was still angry, still hurt, but another part recognized the genuine effort he was making. "Dad?" I said finally. "What happened?" "It's going to take time to get past. I'm trying, but I can't just pretend it didn't happen." "I don't expect you to," he said quickly. I don't deserve that kind of forgiveness yet. Maybe ever. He looked around the bakery again. I just want a chance to be part of your life again, in whatever way you're comfortable with. On your terms, not mine. The acknowledgement that it would be on my terms felt like a fundamental shift. The father I'd grown up with had always set the terms, had always expected the family to revolve around his needs and preferences. I appreciate that, I said softly. I think we can try. Slowly. He nodded, accepting the limitation. Slowly is good. He glanced at his watch. I should go. Let you finish your work. As he turned to leave, a question that had been nagging at me for months finally found its way to my lips. Dad? Why didn't you just tell me you were having financial troubles? Why go behind my back instead of just asking for help? He stopped, his hand on the door. For a long moment, he didn't speak, and I thought he might leave without answering. But then he turned back to me, his expression pained but honest. Pride, he said simply. Stupid, destructive pride. I couldn't bear for you to see me failing. I've always been the provider, the one who fixed things, who made things work. The thought of asking my daughter for financial help felt like. He trailed off, searching for words. Like failure, I finished for him. He nodded. In trying to protect my ego, I ended up doing something far worse than failing. I betrayed your trust. I've had a lot of time to think about that, especially since the move. About the kind of man I want to be versus the kind of man I was. His honesty touched me in a way his gift hadn't. This wasn't a perfectly polished apology or a strategic attempt to repair the relationship. This was raw truth, uncomfortable but necessary. Thank you for telling me that, I said. It helps me understand, even if it doesn't change what happened. Nothing can change what happened, he agreed. I can only try to be better going forward. After he left, I sat for a long time with the box of measuring spoons, running my fingers over the smooth wood, thinking about redemption and second chances, about boundaries and respect. I wasn't ready to fully trust my parents again. That would take much more time, many more actions that demonstrated their respect for my independence. But I was ready to allow for the possibility that people could change, that relationships could be rebuilt, albeit on a different foundation than before. The road ahead would have its challenges. There would be missteps, moments of doubt, perhaps even setbacks. But as I carefully placed the wooden spoons in a display on the bakery counter, visible but protected, valued but not taken for granted, I felt a sense of peace with the path I'd chosen. Not forgetting, but moving forward. Not excuse, but understanding. Not blind trust, but cautious hope. It wasn't a perfect ending to a painful chapter, but perhaps it was something better, a thoughtful beginning to a new story, one where I defined the terms, set the boundaries, and wrote my own role. A story that, despite its difficult origins, might yet have a sweet ending. 1 year after, the grand opening of Sarah's Sweet Spot, I stood in my kitchen at 4 a.m., carefully arranging a dozen anniversary cupcakes in a special display box. Each one was topped with a delicate sugar decoration, a tiny key, symbolizing the moment I'd unlocked the door to my bakery for the first time. The journey to this milestone had been anything but straightforward, yet here I was, celebrating. A year of success that exceeded even my most optimistic projections. My phone lit up with a calendar reminder. Meeting with James, 10 a.m. James Thornton was a local business investor who'd approached me last month about potentially opening a second location across town. The idea both thrilled and terrified me. Was I ready to expand? Could I maintain the quality and personal touch that had become my trademark? I finished boxing the cupcakes and headed to the bakery, driving through streets still dark and quiet. As I rounded the corner to Maple Street, I spotted a figure sitting on the bench outside my shop. My heart skipped a beat before I recognized Mike, bundled up against the early autumn chill, 2 coffee cups in hand. "You're here early," I said, unlocking the door. He handed me one of the coffees, strong and black, just as I liked it. Thought, you might want a surprise helper on anniversary day. Plus, I couldn't sleep. I raised an eyebrow as we entered the warmth of the bakery. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just..." He hesitated, setting his coffee down on the counter. "I got a job offer yesterday, in Chicago." "Chicago? That's amazing." I flipped on the lights and turned to look at him. "Isn't it?" He shrugged, but couldn't hide his smile. "It's with a tech startup doing exactly the kind of programming I've wanted to focus on. Better salary, room for growth." "Then why couldn't you sleep? This sounds perfect." He leaned against the counter, watching as I began pulling ingredients for the day's first batches. I was thinking about Mom and Dad, about leaving them. They're just starting to really adjust to everything. The smaller place, the tighter. Budget, rebuilding things with you. I measured flour into the industrial mixer, considering my words carefully. They'll miss you, but they'll understand. They want you to be happy. "Like they understood when you wanted to open your bakery?" he asked, a hint of the old bitterness in his voice. I stopped what I was doing and faced him directly. "That was different, Mike. They didn't just not understand my dreams. They committed fraud to fund their renovations, using my name and credit without permission." He winced. "I know. I didn't mean to minimize what they did. It's just, I can't help feeling like I'm abandoning them when they're still vulnerable." I softened, recognizing the genuine concern behind his words. "You're not responsible for their well-being, Mike. They're adults who made choices that had consequences. Besides," I added, returning to my measuring, "things are better now. Different, but better in some ways." He nodded slowly. "You're right, and it's not like Chicago is on another planet. I can visit." "Exactly." I handed him an apron. "Now make yourself useful. Those lemons aren't going to zest themselves." We worked side by side in comfortable silence for a while, the familiar rhythms of baking creating a soothing backdrop to our thoughts. Mike had become a surprisingly regular presence at the bakery over the past year, dropping by to help during busy periods or just to share a coffee after closing. Our relationship had evolved into something I'd never expected. A genuine friendship based on mutual respect rather than just shared DNA. "Have you told them yet?" I asked, as I slid a tray of croissants into the oven. "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first." His admission touched me. A year ago, I would have been the last person he'd consult about family matters. "They'll be happy for you," I assured him. "And if they're not initially, they'll come around." He grinned. "Like they did with you?" "Eventually, yes." I checked the timer on the oven. "Though I hope your path involves fewer lawyers and courtrooms." He laughed, and I marveled at how we could now joke about what had once been so painful. Time hadn't erased the hurt, but it had dulled its edges, allowing space for new understanding to grow. By 7 a.m., the bakery was filled with the intoxicating scents of fresh bread, vanilla, and cinnamon. My 2 assistants, Elena and Jasmine, arrived to help with the final preparations before opening. I'd placed a special anniversary specials sign in the window the night before, offering limited edition treats and a free mini cupcake with every purchase. At precisely 9 a.m., I unlocked the doors to find a line of customers stretching down the block. The local newspaper had run a feature on the bakery's 1-year milestone, and it seemed like half the neighborhood had turned out to celebrate. The morning passed in a happy blur of transactions, congratulations, and the particular joy that comes from watching people enjoy food made with care and skill. Around noon, the bell above the door jingled, and I looked up to see my parents entering, tentatively, as if still uncertain of their welcome despite the gradual warming of our relationship over the past year. My mother carried a large gift bag, while my father held what appeared to be a framed picture. I handed the register over to Elena and went to greet them. "Happy anniversary," my mother said, smiling. "The place is packed. We weren't sure if we should come by on such a busy day." "I'm glad you did," I said, meaning it. "We're celebrating all day. Have you eaten lunch? I can have Mike save you a table." My father looked surprised. "Mike's here?" "He showed up at 5 a.m. to help. He's in the back now, processing a new batch of dough." My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite decipher. "That's wonderful," my mother said. "We'd love to see him, too. But first, we brought you something." She handed me the gift bag. Inside was a leather-bound cookbook, its cover embossed with the bakery's logo. I opened it to find blank pages, each with spaces for recipe name, ingredients, methods, and notes. "We thought you might like to document your creations," my mother explained. "Start your own collection of recipes to pass down someday." The thoughtfulness of the gift struck me. It wasn't just a cookbook, it was an acknowledgement of my professional identity, of the legacy I was building. "It's perfect," I said softly. "Thank you." My father cleared his throat, then held out the framed item he'd been carrying. It was a black and white photograph of me as a child, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, standing on a kitchen chair beside my grandmother, both of us, covered in flour, laughing as we kneaded dough together. "We found this when we were downsizing," he said. "Thought it might be nice for your office, a reminder of where it all started." I took the photograph, studying the joy on my younger self's face, the patient affection in my grandmother's eyes. I remembered that day, making cinnamon rolls on a rainy Saturday, my grandmother letting me add extra cinnamon because it was my favorite, even though it wasn't in her recipe. "I'd forgotten about this," I said, emotion thickening my voice. "Grandma's cinnamon rolls. They were the first thing I learned to bake." My father nodded. "She always said you had the touch, that you understood food was about more than taste. It was about making people feel something." The fact that he remembered this, that he'd understood this fundamental truth about my passion for baking, touched me deeply. It suggested that perhaps he'd seen me more clearly than I'd realized, even if his actions hadn't always reflected that understanding. "Thank you," I said again. "Both of these gifts are meaningful." Mike emerged from the kitchen then, flour dusting his hair, surprise registering on his face when he saw our parents. "Mom, Dad, didn't know you were coming by." The slight panic in his eyes told me he hadn't yet shared his news about Chicago. I gave him a reassuring nod, a silent promise that I wouldn't mention it. "Why don't you all take that corner table?" I suggested. "I'll bring over some lunch and join you for a few minutes when I can." As they settled at the table, I watched from behind the counter, struck by the scene. My family gathered in my bakery, in the space I'd created. The business I'd fought for. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined this moment. The wounds had been too fresh, the betrayal too profound. I prepared a tray with samples of the day's specials and a pot of coffee, then joined them for a brief respite from the bustling business. "So," my father said as I sat down, "1 year in business. How does it feel?" "Surreal," I admitted. "Exhausting." "Wonderful," my mother smiled. "You've always been so determined, even as a little girl, once you set your mind to something." "Like the time she decided to rearrange her entire bedroom at midnight," Mike chimed in, grinning. "Remember that? Dad found her trying to move the dresser by herself." "I was 8, I protested, laughing. "And that dresser was clearly in the wrong spot." "You never could leave well enough alone," my father said, but his tone was warm, admiring, even. Always seeing how things could be better, different. The observation struck me as surprisingly insightful. It was true. I'd always been driven to improve things, to reimagine possibilities. That same quality had given me the courage to fight for my financial independence, to refuse to accept what they'd done, to insist on better for myself. We chatted a while longer before I had to return to work. As they prepared to leave, my mother hugged me tightly. "We're so proud of you, Sarah," she whispered. "Not just for this," she gestured around the bakery, "but for everything. For standing up for yourself, even when it was against us, especially then." Her words wrapped around my heart, beginning to heal a fracture I hadn't fully acknowledged, was still there. My father's goodbye was more reserved, a brief hug, a pat on the shoulder, but his eyes conveyed what he couldn't say aloud: respect, regret, pride. After they left, the day continued at its frantic pace. By closing time, we'd served over 300 customers and sold out of nearly everything. My feet ached, my back was sore, and my face hurt from smiling. But the satisfaction of the day outweighed any physical discomfort. As Elena and Jasmine cleaned up, I retreated to my small office to review the day's sales figures. The numbers were impressive, our best day yet by a significant margin. If this trend continued, James Thornton's proposal for a second location might not be so far-fetched after all. A knock at the office door interrupted my calculations. Patricia stood in the doorway, holding a bottle of champagne. "I thought the anniversary girl might be ready for a celebration," she said, smiling. "You have no idea," I replied, closing my laptop. "Come in. I'll find some glasses." We settled on the comfortable chairs I'd placed in the corner of the office for quiet meetings. I'd decorated the space with care. Photographs of my favorite creations on one wall, my culinary school diploma on another, and now, the childhood photo my father had brought, placed on my desk where I could see it each day. Patricia noticed it immediately. "New edition?" "My parents brought it today. It's me with my grandmother, my first baking lesson." She studied it thoughtfully. Full circle moment. She handed me a glass of champagne. To 1 year of Sarah's sweet spot, and to the woman who made it happen despite every obstacle. We clinked glasses, the crystal sound bright in the quiet office. "You know," Patricia said after a moment, "when you first came to see me about the mortgage fraud, I wasn't sure you'd go through with it." "Really? Why not?" "Because fighting family is the hardest battle there is. Most people talk themselves out of it, convince themselves to accept the injustice for the sake of peace. I considered this. I nearly did, multiple times. But you didn't. You held firm, not out of vengeance, but out of self-respect." She gestured around the office, the bakery beyond. "And look what came of it." "Not just the bakery," I said quietly. "Everything. I'm different now, stronger." "That's the real victory," Patricia agreed. "Not the courtroom win, or even the business success, but who you've become through it all." We talked a while longer, sharing stories and laughs, until Patricia glanced at her watch and realized how late it had grown. "I should go," she said, gathering her things. "Court in the morning, and unlike some people, I haven't mastered functioning on 4 hours of sleep." I walked her to the door, grateful once again for this unexpected friendship that had emerged from such difficult circumstances. "Patricia," I said as she was leaving, "thank you for everything." She squeezed my hand. "No thanks needed. Just keep baking those chocolate sea salt cookies. They're saving my diet-related sanity." After she left, I did a final walkthrough of the bakery, making sure everything was ready for tomorrow's early start. As I moved through the quiet space, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past 2 years, from the devastating discovery of the fraudulent mortgage to this moment of professional success and personal peace. The path had been neither straight nor easy. There had been legal battles, family estrangements, financial setbacks, and moments of profound doubt. But there had also been unexpected allies, new friendships, personal growth, and ultimately, a kind of healing I hadn't thought possible. My parents and I would never return to the relationship we'd had before. Too much had been revealed, too many painful truths exposed. But we were building something new, a relationship based on genuine respect rather than expected obedience, on earned trust rather than assumed entitlement. Mike was finding his own path, preparing to spread his wings in Chicago, free from the old family dynamics that had defined him for so long. Our bond as siblings had strengthened through adversity, evolving into a friendship I deeply valued. And I had found my voice, not just in standing up to my parents, but in creating a space that reflected my values, my vision, my passion for bringing joy through food. As I turned out the lights and locked the door behind me, I thought about the judge's words from that pivotal day in court. Family relationships do not override individual legal rights. Your daughter is not an extension of yourselves. She is a separate person with her own financial identity and future. Those words had been a revelation, giving name to something I'd felt but couldn't articulate. They had given me permission to protect myself, to demand better, to believe I deserved more than to be used without consent. Walking to my car under a sky sprinkled with stars, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for what I had achieved, but for the difficult journey that had made it possible. The betrayal that could have destroyed me had instead become the catalyst for a life more authentic and fulfilling than I'd ever imagined. 6 months later, on a crisp spring morning, I stood before the doors of Sarah's Sweet Spot, Riverside, the second location of my now flourishing business. The renovation had taken longer than expected, but the result was everything I'd envisioned. Warm lighting, rustic wooden tables, display cases gleaming with pastries, and breads made with care and skill. Elena, now promoted to assistant manager, stood beside me, clipboard in hand as we reviewed the final checklist before opening. "Signage is up, health inspection passed, staff trained," she read off. "We're good to go, boss." "Not quite," I said, pulling a small box from my bag. Inside was a brass plaque identical to the one Patricia had given me for the original location. Sarah's Sweet Spot, Estier 2026, dreams deferred but not denied. Elena helped me mount it beside the register, the perfect finishing touch to a space that represented not just business expansion, but personal vindication. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike. "Landed safely. We'll be there by 10. Save me something with chocolate." He'd flown in specially for the opening, taking time off from his new job in Chicago. The position had exceeded his expectations, providing challenges and opportunities that had helped him grow both professionally and personally. The distance from our parents had been good for him, allowing him to define himself beyond family expectations. Outside, a small crowd had begun to gather, eager to experience the bakery that had developed such a devoted following across town. Among them, I spotted my parents, standing slightly apart from the others, my mother holding a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite. Our relationship continued to evolve, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes with surprising ease. They'd honored the plea agreement, refinancing the house solely in their names, paying for credit repair services that had fully restored my credit rating. More importantly, they'd respected my boundaries, never presuming upon our slowly rebuilding relationship, always asking rather than assuming. Last month, they'd invited me to dinner at their condo, a simple meal, nothing elaborate, in their modest new home. My father had shown me his latest woodworking projects. My mother had shared photos from a community garden she'd joined. We'd talked about Mike's success in Chicago, about the plans for the new bakery location. What we hadn't discussed, what we no longer needed to discuss, was the fraud that had driven us apart. It wasn't that it was forgotten or dismissed. Rather, it had been acknowledged, addressed, and integrated into our shared history. It had changed us, individually and collectively, in ways that could not be undone but could be understood. At precisely 9 a.m., I unlocked the doors of Sarah's Sweet Spot, Riverside, and welcomed the first customers. The day passed in a whirlwind of transactions, congratulations, and the particular joy that comes from watching people enjoy food made with love and attention. My parents waited until the initial rush had subsided before approaching the counter. My mother presented the sunflowers with a smile. "They're beautiful," I said, accepting them. "Thank you for coming." "We wouldn't have missed it," my father replied. "This is quite an achievement, Sarah. 2 locations in 18 months. 3, actually," I admitted, surprising myself with the revelation. I hadn't planned to share the news yet, but something about the moment felt right. "I signed the lease for a small kiosk at the farmer's market yesterday. It'll just be open weekends during the growing season, but it's a start in that part of town." Pride shone in my mother's eyes. "You're building an empire," I laughed. "Hardly, but it's growing in a way that feels right, sustainable, true to what I want." And that was the key difference. What I wanted, not what was expected of me or convenient for others. My choices, my dreams, my boundaries. Mike arrived then, rushing in with the energy that always seemed to surround him, hugging me tightly, before greeting our parents. "Sorry I'm late," he said. "The flight was delayed, and then traffic from the airport was insane." "You're just in time," I assured him. "I saved you a chocolate croissant." As I watched him chat animatedly with our parents about his life in Chicago, I was struck by how much we'd all changed. Mike stood taller, spoke more confidently, no longer seeking approval with every statement. My parents listened more than they talked, asked questions rather than making assumptions. And I felt centered in myself, secure in my right to define my own path. The judge's words had been true. I was not an extension of my parents. I was a separate person with my own financial identity and future. But what I hadn't understood then was that this separation wouldn't necessarily mean permanent estrangement. It could instead be the foundation for healthier connections, for relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or exploitation. That evening, after closing, I sat in the quiet of the new bakery, savoring the peace of a successful day. From the small office in the back, I could hear Mike on the phone with his girlfriend in Chicago, his laugh carrying through the space. My parents had returned to their condo after promising to come by my apartment for dinner later in the week. On the counter before me sat a small box that had arrived that morning, a gift from Patricia, who had been unable to attend the opening due to a case in court. Inside was a silver charm in the shape of a gavel, attached to a delicate chain. The note read simply, "Justice comes in many forms. Wear this as a reminder of your courage." I fastened the necklace around my neck, the small gavel resting against my collarbone like a talisman. Justice had indeed come in many forms: legal vindication, financial restoration, professional success, personal growth. But perhaps the most profound justice had been the reclamation of my own story, the right to determine my own worth, to establish my own boundaries. The betrayal that had once threatened to define me had instead become just one chapter in a much longer, richer narrative. A narrative I was writing on my own terms, with characters who had earned their places through respect rather than entitlement. As I locked up the new bakery and headed home, the silver gavel caught the light of the setting sun. It reminded me not just of what I had overcome, but of what I had built from the broken pieces. A life that was authentically mine. Boundaries that were respected. Relationships that were earned rather than assumed. The judge's words to my parents that day in court had changed everything. What you did was not a favor to her. It was not a family arrangement. It was fraud. It was theft of identity. And it was a profound breach of trust against someone who had every reason to believe you would protect her interests, not exploit them. Those words had validated my pain, my anger, my right to protect myself. They had been the first step on a journey that had led me here, to a life more fulfilling than I could have imagined, to relationships more honest than I had known were possible, to a strength I hadn't realized I possessed. Justice, it turned out, wasn't just about punishment or retribution. It was about restoration of credit scores and financial freedom, yes, but more importantly, of self-worth and personal agency. It was about creating the conditions for a future unburdened by the weight of past exploitation, a future where trust could be rebuilt on foundations of genuine respect. As I drove home under a sky painted with the last colors of sunset, I thought about the many forms of justice I had found and the sweet life I had built from the bitter seeds of betrayal. It wasn't a perfect ending. Life rarely offers those. But it was something better, a genuine beginning, hard-won and heartfelt, to a story that continued to unfold, one carefully measured batch of dough at a time. 5 years had passed since that life-changing phone call. 5 years since I discovered my parents had mortgaged my future without my consent. 5 years of rebuilding, growing, and transforming not just my business, but myself. On this particular morning, I arrived at Sarah's Sweet Spot Central, what we now called the original location, earlier than usual. The sky was still dark, stars fading as dawn approached. I let myself in, breathing in the familiar scent of vanilla and cinnamon that seemed permanently infused in the walls. In the 5 years since opening, we had expanded to 3 locations across Portland, plus the seasonal farmers market kiosk that had become surprisingly profitable during summer months. Today was special, though not in a way my customers would notice. Today marked exactly 5 years since Judge Eleanor Hamilton had spoken those words that changed everything. Family relationships do not override individual legal rights. 5 years since she had seen me not as a daughter failing her duty, but as a person whose autonomy had been violated. I moved through the darkened bakery, turning on lights, checking the prep list for the day. My team would arrive in an hour, but I wanted this quiet moment alone with my thoughts. I ran my hand along the marble countertop, remembering how it had felt that first morning, when everything was new and uncertain, and tinged with both fear and hope. The brass plaque Patricia had given me still hung by the register. Sarah's Suite. Spot. Est. 2025. Dreams deferred but not denied. Its twin hung in each of our locations, a reminder of what I'd overcome to get here. My phone buzzed with a text from Megan, my business manager. The bank approved the loan for the 4th location. Papers ready to sign whenever you are. Congratulations. I smiled, a surge of satisfaction warming me from within. This newest expansion would be different. A teaching kitchen where I could offer classes, share the joy of baking with others, perhaps even mentor young chefs struggling to find their way as I once had. As I began mixing dough for the morning's first batch of croissants, my mind drifted to the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal had been devastating, but what came after? The standing up for myself, the rebuilding of boundaries, the creation of something that was wholly mine, had shaped me into someone stronger than I'd ever imagined I could be. My parents and I had reached a place of cautious reconciliation. They would never fully understand the depth of their betrayal, but they had come to respect my boundaries in ways they never had before. My father no longer offered unsolicited advice about my business finances. My mother no longer assumed I would rearrange my schedule for family events. Small things, perhaps, but significant shifts in a dynamic that had once been defined by their expectations and my compliance. Mike had flourished in Chicago, recently being promoted to lead developer at his tech company. Our relationship had deepened into a friendship I treasured, built on mutual respect rather than shared family history. He visited Portland every few months, always making time to help at the bakery, to share coffee and conversation, to be present not out of obligation but genuine connection. The door chimed, startling me from my reverie. I looked up, confused. It was too early for customers, too early even for staff. Patricia stood in the entrance, holding 2 takeout cups of coffee, her silver hair pulled back in its usual neat bun, her smile warm in the soft light. "I thought you might be here early today," she said, setting one of the cups on the counter. "Couldn't sleep last night thinking about what today means." I wiped flour from my hands and accepted the coffee gratefully. "You remembered?" "Of course I remembered. It's not every day you get to witness someone reclaim their life so completely." She looked around the bakery, pride evident in her eyes. "Look what you've built, Sarah. Not just the business, but everything." We settled at one of the small tables by the window, watching as the sky gradually lightened, painting the street in shades of pink and gold. "Have you heard from them?" Patricia asked, knowing I would understand who she meant. I nodded. "Mom texted last night, said she was thinking of me, that she's proud of who I've become. Dad sent an email with pictures of a new dining table he's made for their condo." I smiled, a mixture of emotions washing over me. He mentioned remembering what today was, that he hoped I was doing well. "That's progress," Patricia observed. 5 years ago, they couldn't even acknowledge what they'd done. It's taken time, a lot of honest conversations, some therapy on all sides. I sipped my coffee, considering. They're different now. Or maybe I just see them differently. Either way, the relationship is healthier than it's ever been. Patricia nodded, thoughtfully. "You know, in all my years practicing law, I've seen countless victims of identity theft. But family fraud cases are different. The betrayal cuts deeper, the healing is more complex. Because you're supposed to be able to trust family," I said softly. "Exactly. And when that trust is broken, especially by parents, it shakes your foundation. Many people never fully recover." She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "But you didn't just recover, Sarah. You thrived." The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Elena, now my head baker across all locations. Her expertise and creativity having blossomed over the years we'd worked together. "Morning, boss," she called, then noticed Patricia. "Oh, hi. Sorry to interrupt." "You're not interrupting," I assured her. "We were just reminiscing." Elena hung her coat on the rack by the door. "Big day today, huh?" 5 years since the judge laid down the law. She grinned. "We should put her face on a cookie or something." I laughed, grateful for Elena's understanding of the significance of this day. I'd shared my story with her years ago when she'd asked about the brass plaque. She'd become not just an employee, but a confidant, someone who understood the deeper meaning behind this business. "Maybe not a cookie," I said, "but I did prepare something special for today." I went to the refrigerator and pulled out a cake I'd made late last night after closing. A simple but elegant creation, decorated with delicate sugar gavel shapes and the words, "Justice Served," in gold lettering. Elena's eyes widened. "That's amazing. Are we selling slices today?" I shook my head. "This is just for us, the team, a private celebration of how far we've all come." As more staff arrived, the bakery came alive with the sounds of preparation, mixers whirring, ovens preheating, friendly conversation flowing. I sliced the cake, sharing pieces with Patricia, Elena, and each team member as they arrived, briefly explaining the significance of the day. "To standing up for yourself," Patricia toasted with her coffee cup. "To boundaries and second chances," I added. "To Sarah's sweet spot," Elena chimed in. "And the boss who made it all happen." The team cheered, many of them unaware of the full story, but understanding enough to know this was a meaningful milestone. As we finished our impromptu celebration and turned to the day's work, my phone rang. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Amelia Green from Portland Monthly Magazine. I'm calling about the profile we're doing on local business success stories. Do you have time for a few questions?" I agreed to the interview, arranging to meet the journalist later that afternoon. As I hung up, a sense of surreal gratitude washed over me. From credit fraud victim to profile-worthy business owner in 5 years, it wasn't a journey I could have imagined that day in the police station filing a report against my own parents. The morning rush began, customers streaming in for their daily fix of pastries and coffee. I worked alongside my team, the rhythm of service providing a comforting structure to the emotionally charged day. Around 11, during a brief lull, the bell above the door chimed again. I looked up to see my parents standing in the entrance, holding a small package wrapped in silver paper. They hadn't mentioned coming by today, and for a moment, old tensions flared. The assumption that they could just show up, the disregard for my schedule. But then my mother spoke, her voice tentative. "We should have called first. Is this a bad time? We can come back later." The simple acknowledgement that my time was valuable, that they didn't have an automatic right to it, diffused the momentary tension. This was the new dynamic we'd built, one interaction at a time. "It's fine," I said, gesturing to a small table in the corner. "I can take a few minutes. Would you like some coffee?" They settled at the table while I prepared 2 cups, my father's black, my mother's with a splash of cream, no sugar. 5 years ago, they would have expected me to remember these preferences without asking. Today, they thanked me sincerely when I brought the correct orders. "We wanted to mark the day," my father said, sliding the silver package across the table. "Not to celebrate what happened, but to acknowledge how far we've all come since then." I unwrapped the package carefully. Inside was a small wooden box, exquisitely crafted with dovetail joints and inlaid with my initials. My father's woodworking had progressed from hobby to serious craft over the years, each piece showing greater skill than the last. "Open it," my mother urged softly. Inside, the box, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a key. Not a new key, but an old one, tarnished with age. I looked up, confused. "It's the key to our first house," my father explained. "The one we had before Lakewood Heights. Before—" He trailed off, but I understood. Before the financial pressures, before the poor decisions, before the fraud that had shattered our family. "We found it when we were going through some old boxes," my mother added. "It made us think about foundations, about building something solid to begin with, rather than trying to make something look better than it is." The symbolism wasn't lost. On me, the house they'd owned outright versus the one they'd mortgaged fraudulently, authentic foundations versus false appearances. "We thought you should have it," my father continued, "as a reminder that even when things are modest, they can be genuine. You've built your business the right way. Honestly, through hard work, step by step." I ran my finger over the worn key, surprised by the emotion welling up inside me. It was perhaps the most meaningful acknowledgement they'd ever made. Not just of what they'd done wrong, but of what I'd done right. "Thank you," I said simply. "This means a lot." We talked for a few more minutes about everyday things. Mike's upcoming visit, a community garden project my mother had joined, plans for the new teaching kitchen location. The conversation flowed more easily than it once had, without the undercurrents of expectation and resentment that had defined our interactions for so long. As they prepared to leave, my mother hugged me gently. "We're so proud of you, Sarah. Not just for the success, but for the way you've built it. For the person you've become." My father's hug was briefer but equally heartfelt. "You showed us a better way," he said quietly. "Thank you for giving us a chance to learn it." After they left, I returned to the wooden box, examining the old key from different angles. It was such a simple object, yet it carried layers of meaning, about foundations and authenticity, about the doors we choose to unlock or leave closed. The afternoon passed in a blur of customers, preparations, and administrative tasks. At 3, Amelia Green from Portland Monthly arrived for our interview, recorder in hand, eyes bright with interest. "Thank you for making time for me," she began as we settled in my office. "Your story is fascinating. 3 locations in 5 years. A cult following for your pastries, and now plans for a teaching kitchen. What's your secret? I considered the question, thinking about all the factors that had contributed to my success. Hard work, certainly, but also the lessons learned through adversity, the strength found in standing up for myself, the clarity that came from setting boundaries. There's no secret, I said finally. Just a belief that we all deserve to build our lives on solid foundations. That success means nothing if it's built on falsehoods. And that sometimes the hardest steps, standing up for yourself, saying no to people you love, refusing to accept mistreatment, are the ones that lead to the most authentic path forward. Amelia nodded, making notes. Your first location opened not long after a personal legal battle, I understand. Are you comfortable talking about how that influenced your approach to business? The question was direct but not invasive. 5 years ago, I might have deflected, unwilling to share that painful chapter. Today, I saw it differently, as an integral part of my journey, one that might help others facing similar situations. I discovered my parents had taken out a mortgage, using my name and credit without my knowledge or consent, I said evenly. When I confronted them, they expected me to accept it because family helps family. Instead, I took legal action to clear my name and restore my credit. Amelia's eyes widened. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, I acknowledged, but also the most necessary. It taught me that boundaries aren't selfish, they're essential. That standing up for yourself isn't cruel, it's an act of self-respect. These principles have shaped how I run my business, how I treat my team, how I engage with the world. The interview continued, touching on my culinary background, my business philosophy, my plans for the future. Throughout, I found myself circling back to those core lessons: authenticity, boundaries, respect, that had emerged from the crucible of betrayal and legal battle. One last question, Amelia said as we concluded. What would you say to someone facing a similar situation? Family fraud, betrayal by loved ones? I thought of the many emails I'd received since sharing my story on the bakery's blog last year. Messages from people struggling with family exploitation, unsure if they had the right to protect themselves, afraid of being seen as the villain for saying no. I would tell them that love shouldn't require self-erasure, I said carefully. That family should build you up, not use you up. That standing firm in your boundaries might be the hardest thing you ever do, but also the most transformative. And that whatever they decide, they're not alone in that struggle. After Amelia left, promising to send a draft of the article before publication, I found myself drawn to the wall of my office where I'd hung the photograph my father had given me a year into the bakery's operation. Young Sarah with her grandmother covered in flour, learning to make cinnamon rolls. Beside it now hung the frame Judge Hamilton had signed after my bakery's 3rd anniversary, when she'd happened to come in for coffee and recognized me from the case. To Sarah, she'd written, who taught an old judge that justice and healing can coexist. Your courage inspires. The day wound down, the evening shift taking over from the morning crew. I completed some paperwork, reviewed plans for the teaching kitchen with my architect, and prepared to head home. As I gathered my things, Elena appeared in the doorway. Almost forgot. This came for you today. She handed me an envelope embossed with the logo of the Portland Business Association. Inside was an invitation. The Portland Business Association is pleased to nominate Sarah Mitchell for the Resilience in Business Award, recognizing entrepreneurs who have overcome significant obstacles to achieve success. The award ceremony will take place. I set the invitation on my desk, a mixture of emotions washing over me. 5 years ago, significant obstacles had meant my own parents using my identity for financial gain. 5 years ago, resilience had meant filing a police report against the people who had raised me. 5 years ago, success had seemed like an impossible dream as my loan application was denied, due to fraudulent debt in my name. Yet here I was, nominated for an award that acknowledged not just what I'd overcome, but what I'd built from the broken pieces. As I left the bakery that evening, the setting sun painting the street in shades of gold and amber, I thought about the legacy I was creating. Not just a successful business, but a testament to the power of standing up for oneself, of insisting on respect, of building life on authentic foundations. The old key my parents had given me rested in my pocket, a tangible reminder of how far we'd all come. Not back to what we were, that was impossible, but forward to something new, something possibly better because it was built on truth rather than convenience, on respect rather than exploitation. 5 years after that devastating phone call, I had not just survived but thrived. The bakery's success was the most visible outcome, but the real victory was internal, the unshakable knowledge that I was worthy of respect, that my boundaries mattered, that my future was mine to determine. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Mike. "Just landed in Portland. Dinner tonight to celebrate the anniversary of you becoming a badass?" My treat. I smiled, texting back, "Definitely. Pick me up at 7. The sun dipped below the horizon as I drove home, casting long shadows across the city. 5 years ago, I had stood in a courtroom, trembling as a judge validated what I had barely been able to articulate, that I was a separate person with my own financial identity and future, not an extension of my parents to be used at their convenience. Today, I drove toward that future with confidence, the road ahead clear and promising. The journey had been difficult, the betrayal profound, the healing complex and ongoing. But as Judge Hamilton had written, justice and healing could coexist. Boundaries and love could coexist. Standing firm and moving forward could coexist. The key in my pocket wasn't just a symbol of what had been lost, but of what had been found. My voice, my strength, my right to define my own path. In the end, the greatest gift that had emerged from that painful chapter was the knowledge that I could face betrayal without becoming bitter, that I could protect myself without burning all bridges, that I could build a legacy of integrity brick by careful brick. 5 years after a judge had some interesting words for my parents, I had found my own words, clear, confident, and compassionate. Words that acknowledged both the pain of the past and the promise of the future. Words that carved out space for holding others accountable while still allowing for growth and change. As I pulled into my driveway, I caught sight of my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the shaken, betrayed daughter, who had once sat in a courtroom fighting for her financial freedom. This woman, business owner, mentor, survivor, carried herself with a quiet confidence that came not from never having been hurt, but from having navigated that hurt with dignity and purpose. The sun had fully set now, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. 5 years ago, I had stood at a crossroads, faced with the choice between accepting exploitation or fighting for justice. I had chosen the harder path, the one lined with legal battles and family estrangement and painful truths. Today, as I unlocked the door to my own home, purchased with a loan in my own name, secured with my own restored credit, I knew without doubt that I had chosen correctly. Not just for myself, but for every person who would read my story in Portland Monthly, for every young chef who would learn in my teaching kitchen, for every family member who had learned from my boundaries that respect must be the foundation of love. The judge's words had validated my right to protect myself. My actions had transformed that right into reality. And the legacy I continued to build would ensure that the lessons learned would extend far beyond my own story, touching lives I might never even meet. As Mike's car pulled up for our celebratory dinner, I took one last look at the home and life I'd built. Not perfect, but authentically mine. The journey from betrayal to this moment had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led to something precious. A life defined not by what had been done to me, but by what I had chosen to do in response. And in that choice, to stand up, to speak truth, to build with integrity, I had found not just justice, but genuine peace. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.